Cellular respiration is a process that is it's a very important process for living organisms. In this process, living organisms release energy that is then used for all kinds of cellular process. So whether you're biking or you're walking or even laying down and your cells are digesting the foods that you have just had, all of these processes will require energy. And now the term respiration does not um, mean that you're inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide only. That is just one definition of respiration. And in the second definition of respiration is when we say that carbon dioxide and oxygen are both exchanged in the lungs. That is also, we use the term respiration for that. The third kind of definition for respiration is the one that we will spend this chapter on, which is the use of oxygen to break down a large molecule, which is glucose. Glucose is the high energy molecule. It stores its energy in its bond, and when through a process of respiration, which involves oxygen, glucose is then broken down to carbon dioxide and water, which are low energy molecules. And in this reaction, a tremendous amount of energy is released as heat. It's almost 39 to 40% efficient. It's not 100% efficient. Now, a reaction that generates energy is the exergonic reaction. So this reaction is going to be exergonic because energy is going to be released through various steps. Now, a glucose to these low energy molecule does not take place in one reaction. The reason for that we did previously is if it's one step, a lot of the energy would be wasted. So when the reaction takes place at various level, we will learn that at various level energy will be trapped in the molecule of ATP. So the energy that is released is then used to help form the bond between inorganic phosphate and ADP to form ATP, which is the high energy molecule, or as we call the currency of the cell. Now, most of these reactions that we will learn are redox reaction. Redox reactions are always coupled reactions in which, for example, molecule A is forming molecule B and it's releasing energy. This energy is then used up by molecule, for example, C, to form D. And in order to do that, a lot of times ATP will be formed, and we will see that these reactions are also coupled, which means that they will always be two reactions that are paired up for this process. Most of these redox reactions used coenzyme NAD and FAD. These are both coenzymes, and NAD stands for nicotine adenine dinucleotide. And in shorthand, we call it NAD. And FAD stands for flavin adenine dinucleotide, and it's shorthand called as FAD. In both these reactions, we'll see something similar, which is we will learn about the oxidation and reduction process. Remember, oxidation meant that it is loss of 2 electrons, or it is always going to be followed by gain of hydrogen. So whenever oxidation will take place, you will find that the other molecule gains the hydrogen. So for example, in a reaction over here, when we see NAD and NAD is now gaining hydrogen, it is considered to be reduced because this reaction is going in this direction. On the other hand, when NADH2 releases those electrons, then these electrons are followed by the hydrogen ion. You get the molecule of NAD. So these would be an example of a redox reaction or a coupled reaction. The other thing that I want you to point over here is most of the time, whenever electrons are released, it is always followed by a hydrogen ion. So whenever electrons are accepted, it's going to be followed by hydrogen ion. So oxidation would be loss of electron ions, or it would be the release of the hydrogen ion. I should actually write down. This is, if you're looking at oxidation only, it's going to release the hydrogen ion. It's always going to be followed by one. So the structure of these molecules NAD and FAD is shown in your book, and I'm also have it over here. A large big molecule, you can see that it's got a nitrogenous base, a sugar, and it's linked to a phosphate. So a real complex molecule, but for simplicity, we are just going to use the term NAD and FAD. Whenever you see NAD, it is always going to be reduced to NADH, and so let's just write down this way: NAD reduced to NADH, and the opposite would be oxidation, in which you will lose the electron. So in oxidation, 2 electrons are lost, plus hydrogen ions are also lost. In the reduced stage, you gain 2 electrons, and you also gain hydrogen ions. So very important, that will come up over and over again. So I want you to be very familiar with NAD and FAD, when it is oxidized, when it is reduced, and how to recognize as to which way oxidation is going on and which way reduction is going on. The process of respiration is divided into 3 main steps. Some books will call it the 4 main steps, but step 1 is by itself, 2 and 3 are together, so sometimes we call them as 3-step reaction, and the third and the fourth one that is shown over here, or the third one, depends on which book you're reading. But the 3 phases are glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. It's very important to know where each of this step takes place. For example, the process of glycolysis always takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell, which is the fluid part. So over here, this is where glycolysis will take place. Now, the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain are both in the mitochondria of the cell. So mitochondria are present both in plant cells and animal cells. That will take place in both. However, within the mitochondria, they are divided into 2 regions. The region that is the fold, which are the membranes that are folded, which are also called as the cristae. These are the folded membranes. And the other part is the matrix, and the matrix is the fluid part. So the Krebs cycle takes place in the fluid part, or the matrix, and the electron transport chain takes place in the cristae, or the membranes. So now it's important to remember that mitochondria is usually present in eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells will undergo glycolysis in their cytoplasm, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain in their mitochondria. However, prokaryotic cells, if you remember, do not have organelles. So prokaryotic cells do not have no mitochondria. So if they do not have mitochondria, you can see what will happen. They will only undergo glycolysis, which is the first step of the reaction. Undergo glycolysis only. Eukaryotic cells will undergo all 3 reactions. So this means that if glucose enters the cycle and undergoes only step 1, it will release X number of energy. If glucose enters the cycle and undergoes step 1, step 2, step 3, it will probably need 3 times more energy, or an excessive amount of energy. So this is the end of this section, and we will go on to the next one.